Welcome to the Deeper Thinking podcast. The city wakes differently now. The early morning stampede to packed trains and gridlocked streets has slowed, replaced by something quieter, more ambiguous. The cafes are still open, but their hum is softer, their clientele unhurried. The office towers still stand, but inside, entire floors sit unoccupied, their empty chairs a quiet rebellion against the old order. This is the aftershock of the remote work revolution, a transformation that, despite the corporate and political resistance, refuses to be reversed. For decades, the office was more than just a workplace. It was a proving ground, a stage where professional ambition played out in daily acts of visibility. Success wasn't just measured by output, but by presence. By long hours, by hurried meetings, by the careful choreography of being seen at the right time, in the right place. It was never just about work. It was about belonging, about power, about control. Then came the rupture. The pandemic shattered the illusion that physical presence was indispensable. Across industries, businesses discovered that operations continued, often more efficiently, without the fluorescent-lit rituals of office life. Productivity didn't plummet. For many, it surged. Employees reclaimed hours once lost to commutes, structuring their days around actual work rather than performative busyness. The shift was seismic, irreversible. Yet, the pushback was immediate. Corporate leaders, long accustomed to the optics of authority, began calling workers back, citing vague concerns about culture and collaboration. Banks like Goldman Sachs dismissed remote work as an aberration, insisting that the future of finance still belonged in marble-lobbied skyscrapers. CEOs lamented the supposed loss of creativity, as though ideas could only bloom in air-conditioned conference rooms. And politicians, particularly those nostalgic for an era of strict hierarchies, weaponized the debate, casting remote work as a symptom of societal decay, an indulgence rather than an evolution. But beneath these arguments lurked a deeper unease. If employees could work effectively without being monitored, what else about corporate life was unnecessary? If flexibility didn't harm productivity, why had it been withheld for so long? The battle over remote work wasn't just about efficiency, it was about who controlled the narrative of labor itself. For workers, the shift was more than logistical, it was psychological. Remote work dismantled the structures that had long defined professional identity. Without the shared rhythms of the office, without the tacit validation of a colleague's nod or a manager's passing approval, many found themselves untethered. Work became an abstraction, stripped of its social scaffolding. Some thrived in this new autonomy, while others struggled, grappling with loneliness and the slow erosion of workplace camaraderie. Yet, this transition wasn't unprecedented. History is littered with moments when the nature of work was violently reshaped. The Industrial Revolution tore artisans from their homes and funneled them into factories, replacing centuries of decentralized labor with regimented shifts. The rise of the corporate office in the 20th century did something similar, drawing professionals into cubicles and skyscrapers, creating an architecture of surveillance disguised as efficiency. Now we are witnessing another reversal, one that, rather than pushing workers into centralized spaces, disperses them across geographies, returning work to the home in a digital echo of pre-industrial labor. The economic ripple effects are vast. Cities, once sustained by daily floods of commuters, are feeling the drain. Office real estate markets tremble as vacancies rise. Transit systems, once bursting at peak hours, operate at a fraction of their former capacity. The coffee shops and lunch spots that thrived on predictable foot traffic now face an uncertain future. But while some industries falter, others flourish. Suburban economies, long overshadowed by urban centres, are experiencing a renaissance. Remote work has allowed people to flee high-cost cities, redistributing wealth into smaller towns and rural communities, reshaping the economic map. Yet, for all the benefits, remote work is not without casualties. Young professionals, once able to absorb knowledge through osmosis, overheard conversations, spontaneous mentorship, the quiet diplomacy of office politics, find themselves adrift. The serendipity of in-person collaboration, the creative sparks that emerge from casual hallway chats, are harder to replicate in scheduled Zoom calls. And for those without home offices, those sharing cramped spaces with roommates or balancing work with childcare, The boundary between personal and professional life has all but vanished. This is the paradox of the remote work revolution. It offers liberation, but at a cost. It grants autonomy, but demands discipline. It dissolves barriers, but risks eroding community. It is neither utopia nor catastrophe, but an experiment in real time, a negotiation between the old and the new. The question is not whether remote work is sustainable. It is. The real question is, who will define its future? The workers who have tasted its freedom, or the institutions that seek to reclaim control? Yet, control is a stubborn thing. The corporate world, long accustomed to dictating the terms of employment, is not eager to relinquish its grip. The return to office mandates that swept through industries in 2023 and 2024 were not responses to productivity crises. They were acts of institutional muscle flexing. The financial sector led the charge, with firms like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs insisting on full-time in-office work, not because remote employees were underperforming, but because flexibility threatened the managerial order. If employees no longer needed to be seen to be trusted, then what did that say about the very nature of corporate leadership? Politics, too, has shaped the debate, often in ways that have little to do with work itself. The right-wing hostility toward remote labour isn't merely economic, it's cultural. In the conservative imagination, work from home is framed as a luxury, a deviation from the rugged virtues of traditional labour. It's the same impulse that dismisses progressive labour rights as entitlements, a belief that struggle and discomfort are not just necessary for economic function, but morally instructive. Hence the paradox. The same political figures who spent decades championing labour market flexibility now decry remote work as a sign of social decay. The flexibility they once praised was always about empowering employers, not workers. But the reality is more complex. Remote work is not a binary good or bad. It is a shifting landscape with trade-offs. The freedom to structure one's day brings both autonomy and isolation. The absence of commutes means more personal time but fewer organic interactions. And while remote work offers escape from the rigid hierarchies of the office, it also demands new forms of discipline, self-motivation, boundary setting, and the ability to construct professional identity without external validation. This is perhaps the most profound shift of all, the redefinition of what it means to go to work. For centuries, work was a place, a destination, a communal act. Now it is something portable, intangible, something that happens across screens, across time zones, in bedrooms and kitchens, in coffee shops and co-working spaces. The office, once the default, is becoming optional, a relic of a bygone era for many industries. And yet, the office will not disappear entirely. Certain roles demand physical presence, certain collaborations thrive in shared spaces, and for some, the structure of the workplace is not a burden but a necessity. But what will change is its function. The office of the future will not be a space of obligatory daily attendance, but a hub for intentional gathering, a place for creative collisions rather than bureaucratic routine. The next battle, then, will not be over whether remote work should exist. That question has already been answered. The real struggle will be over who benefits from it. Will companies continue to offload the costs of work onto employees, expecting them to finance their own workspaces while reaping the savings of reduced office expenditures? Or will they reinvest those savings into better wages, better technology, and better support for remote collaboration? For governments, the challenge will be to build infrastructure that supports a workforce no longer tethered to city centres. Public transit systems designed for commuter-heavy schedules must adapt. Housing policies must reckon with the fact that demand is shifting away from urban cores. And labour laws, many of which were written in an era of physical workplaces, must evolve to protect remote workers from the unique vulnerabilities of digital labour, surveillance, unpaid overtime, and the erosion of work-life boundaries. Most importantly, the future of work must be shaped by those who do the work, not just those who profit from it. The remote revolution was not a gift from employers, it was a necessity forced by crisis. But now that it has been unlocked, it will not be easily surrendered. Workers have seen what is possible, and they will not unsee it. The era of unquestioned office supremacy is over. What remains is a world in flux, a work culture that is neither fully remote nor fully in person, but something in between, fluid, negotiated, and evolving. In the end, this is not just a shift in how we work, it is a shift in how we live, how we define productivity, how we structure our time and energy. The future belongs not to the institutions clinging to the past, but to those willing to embrace the complexity of the present. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Deeper Thinking podcast, an audio essay read by me, Holly, your digital narrator. Until next time.